People like you aren't welcome here. Too tense. Too serious. Go drink somewhere else. The bar owner's lip curled as he pointed toward the door. Ethan Cole, recently discharged from the Navy SEALs, sat still, his beer untouched. He hadn't said a word, hadn't looked at anyone twice, just sat quietly in the corner, observing like he always did. Too tense. Ethan asked finally, his voice low, controlled. I haven't even touched the glass. The owner didn't flinch, just jerked his thumb toward the exit. Out, before I throw you out. The next afternoon, just as the Dockhouse Tavern was prepping for its early happy hour, the front door creaked open, and in walked not one, but 12 men, silent, composed, and carrying the unmistakable weight of someone trained to end chaos before it begins. If you believe brotherhood doesn't retire with a uniform, type respect below. The wind carried a salty breeze through the streets of Redwood Bay, a quiet coastal town nestled between the cliffs and the sea. The waves lapped gently against the docks as boats bobbed in rhythm with the tide. To anyone else, it was an ordinary Tuesday evening. But to Ethan Cole, it was the beginning of his new life, a life that felt unsettling in its silence. After 15 years of service as a Navy SEAL, Ethan had been honorably discharged. A lingering spinal injury and nerve damage from an IED blast during his last mission forced him into early retirement. Though physically lean and seemingly unremarkable in appearance, Ethan carried in him the edge of battle, a quiet watchfulness that never faded. He wasn't one to boast. He didn't have to. Everything he'd done and endured was written in his eyes, sharp, gray, and observant. He had arrived in Redwood Bay a week earlier, looking for peace. A fisherman's town with quiet streets and harbor cafes felt like a good place to think, to breathe. He rented a small room above Sam's Bait and Tackle, just a block from the water, furnished with only the basics, a bed, a desk, and a view of the sea. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That evening, with the sun dipping low and casting a golden hue over the horizon, Ethan found himself walking the length of the waterfront, his boots clicking against the wooden pier. He passed shacks selling smoked fish, a souvenir shop, and then saw it, the Dockhouse Tavern. The place didn't look fancy. Weathered siding, a neon open sign flickering in the window, and the muffled sound of country music humming from inside. It wasn't bustling, just a few voices and the clink of glass. Ethan pushed the door open. The smell of old wood, spilled beer, and deep-fried food greeted him. There were maybe 6 patrons, locals by the look of them, hunched over their drinks, speaking in low tones. The barkeep nodded once without a smile. Ethan chose a small table in the far corner, his back to the wall out of instinct. He didn't look around much. His SEAL training had already told him everything he needed to know in the first 10 seconds. 2 exits, one behind the bar, one by the restrooms. No immediate threat, just a typical bar. He ordered a single amber ale and sipped it slowly, letting the silence settle around him. This was what he'd wanted, normalcy. A place where no one asked questions. A place where he could simply be. But the man behind the bar, the owner, by the way he loitered and barked orders, noticed him. Travis Boone, broad-shouldered and red-faced, was known in town for his short fuse and selective hospitality. He ran the Dockhouse Tavern like a captain ran a ship, by whim and mood. His unwritten rules varied by the day, often colored by prejudice and past grudges. Boone narrowed his eyes at Ethan. Something about the man's quiet stillness unsettled him. Boone had a long-held disdain for military types, especially after a few sailors caused a scene at his bar years ago. Since then, he assumed they were all trouble. Boone sauntered over, arms folded across his barrel chest. You've been sitting there 20 minutes, he said gruffly, standing over Ethan like a judge delivering sentence. Ethan glanced up, his expression unreadable. Just enjoying my beer. Boone sneered. You casing the joint or something? You're making people nervous. No one's spoken to me since I walked in, Ethan said evenly. And I haven't moved from this chair. Boone scoffed. I don't like your kind of thinking in my establishment. Ethan's gray eyes flickered. My kind. The military kind. All intense and brooding like you're about to flip a table. I don't want trouble. Ethan's posture remained calm, but there was a weight behind his voice when he responded. I came for a drink. That's it. Well, you can finish it elsewhere, Boone barked. I don't care who you are. This is my bar, and you're not welcome. Ethan didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He stood slowly, pushed in his chair, and left his beer nearly full on the table. He hadn't even taken 3 sips. He glanced at Boone once before walking out into the dusk. Boone shouted after him, "And don't come back. We don't need your kind here." Ethan didn't look back. He walked the darkening streets until he reached the seawall at the edge of town. There, beneath the stars and the rhythm of the tide, he pulled out his phone. Not to call the police. Not to rant online. He opened a secure messaging app known only to a few, a remnant from his active duty days. He typed one simple message. Dockhouse Tavern, Redwood Bay. Owner, Travis Boone. Ejected for being ex-military. Just FYI. E. Cole. He hit send. Then he stood quietly under the cold starlight, the taste of injustice on his tongue more bitter than any beer. The next afternoon, Travis Boone stood behind the bar at the Dockhouse Tavern, drying pint glasses with a rag that had long since given up on cleanliness. The bar was quiet, just the way he liked it on weekdays. A few locals would wander in for early drinks before the fishing boats returned, but otherwise, the place stayed peaceful. Boone liked to think that peace came from how he ran things, with an iron gut and an eye for trouble. And that guy last night, Ethan Cole, definitely trouble, Boone told himself again. Too quiet, too intense. Gave him the same feeling he got when a storm was just beyond the horizon. Best to kick those types out before they break something, he muttered under his breath. He was halfway through stacking clean glasses when a shadow fell over the bar window. Then another. Boone glanced up, his brow furrowed as he saw a matte black van parking with mechanical precision across the street. Its engine idled low and steady, almost like a growl. Within seconds, 2 more identical vans pulled in behind it, forming a silent convoy on the otherwise sleepy waterfront. His instincts flared. These weren't beer distributors. Not tourists either. The first van's door slid open with a soft snick, and out stepped a man in jeans and a fitted gray shirt. His sleeves were rolled up just enough to reveal forearms marked by years of use, not ink. He walked with a quiet, commanding purpose. Logan Graves, senior chief petty officer, retired Navy SEAL, and the kind of leader who didn't raise his voice because he never had to. Behind him came 11 others. Not one of them wore a uniform. There were no medals, no fanfare, but the way they moved, tight formation, measured steps, all eyes scanning in sync, left no room for doubt. These men were military, special forces, SEALs, and they were not here for a drink. Boone's stomach tightened as he stepped around the bar and pushed open the front door. The heat from earlier had vanished. A chill rode the sea breeze into the room with them. He tried to summon his usual bravado. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he said, louder than necessary. "Can I help you with something?" Logan Graves stopped just short of the doorway. His eyes locked on Boone's face, expression unreadable. "You Travis Boone?" The bar owner nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's me. We're here because of an incident," Graves said. "Last night, one of our own was in this establishment. Name's Ethan Cole." Boone's grin faltered. "Listen, I don't want any trouble, okay? That guy was making folks uncomfortable." "Was he speaking loudly?" Graves asked. "No." "Did he touch anyone?" "No." "Did he start anything?" Boone hesitated. "No, but what?" Graves' voice was calm, level. He was quiet, observant, sat still in the corner. Boone shifted on his feet. "Look, I've had bad experiences with military types before. Guy gave off a weird vibe, so I did what I thought was best." Graves took a step forward, just one, but the movement changed the air in the room. "My team has operated in sandstorms, jungles, collapsed cities, and under sniper fire. We know a threat when we see one." And Ethan Cole, Graves tilted his head. He was looking for peace. He found prejudice instead. Behind Graves, the rest of the SEAL team had lined up loosely along the sidewalk. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They simply stood there, watching. Their stillness was louder than shouting. Boone licked his lips. "I didn't mean any harm." One of the men, a giant with arms like steel beams, shifted slightly. His nickname was Tank, and even in silence, he radiated something primal. Boone noticed and took a quick step back. "We're not here to vandalize your place," Graves said. "We're not thugs, but you crossed a line. A man who served this country, who bled for it, was thrown out of your bar like trash." Boone opened his mouth, but Graves cut him off. "You don't get to fix this with a shrug. You're going to own it." The bar owner's heart began to pound. "What do you mean own it?" Another man stepped forward, lean and composed, with sharp eyes that seemed to take mental inventory of the entire bar in 3 seconds flat. "Caleb Doc Vance, the team's medic and also their numbers guy. You're going to apologize. Personally, publicly," Doc said. "Then you're going to make a sizable donation to the Navy SEAL Foundation in Ethan's name. We'll help you decide the amount." Boone went pale. "A donation? You guys serious?" Graves didn't blink. Dead serious. Boone looked back at the dozen silent men, standing in unity, watching his every move. Then he realized something terrifying. They weren't angry. They were disappointed. And somehow that was worse. The silence inside the Dockhouse Tavern was suffocating. Travis Boone stood motionless, trying to steady his breath as Logan Graves' words echoed in his head. "You're going to apologize. Then you're going to make a sizable donation to the Navy SEAL Foundation in Ethan's name." Boone glanced toward the bar. Rick, his part-time bouncer, was pretending to dry mugs with intense concentration, deliberately avoiding the growing tension. Boone tried to laugh it off. "Look, I don't have a problem with the military. I fly the flag. I donate to the Veterans Day pancake breakfast every year." "That's symbolic," Doc said from his place beside Graves, arms crossed. "We're talking about substance." Boone's face flushed. "I'm not made of money." "You don't need to be," Doc replied smoothly. "You just need to understand the value of respect and show it. Tangibly." Graves took another step forward. His voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. "This isn't extortion. No one's threatening you. You're free to refuse. But let me be crystal clear. The moment you chose to humiliate Ethan Cole for simply existing in your bar, you made it personal to all of us." Boone swallowed hard. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. "You have two options," Graves said. "Make it right, or let your business be remembered for what it is. A place that drove out a veteran for being too quiet." Boone stared at the floor. He thought about the locals, the tourists, and how fast word traveled in a town like Redwood Bay. And then he thought about the 12 men outside, standing like silent guardians of a truth he had violated. "I'll make the call," he muttered. "No," Graves said. "You'll make the call now." Boone hesitated, then slowly pulled his phone from his pocket. Doc stepped forward, holding out a piece of paper with Ethan Cole's number written in neat block letters. Boone took it like it was a court summons. His fingers shook as he dialed. Across town, Ethan sat by the window in his small upstairs room above Sam's bait and tackle, watching the sea haze roll in. The buzz of his phone broke the quiet. A moment's hesitation, then he answered. "Ethan Cole," he said simply. On the other end, Boone's voice came through, tight, unfamiliar, and lacking its usual bark. "Mr. Cole, this is Travis Boone from the Dockhouse." Ethan said nothing. Boone cleared his throat. I want to apologize for what I said, for how I treated you. I misjudged you. That was wrong." Ethan let the silence stretch. It wasn't out of cruelty. It was out of patience. The kind of patience that comes from having survived far worse than bad manners and bigotry. Boone continued, stumbling. "I'll let my bias get the better of me. You didn't deserve that. You're welcome in my bar anytime. And I mean that." Ethan's voice was calm, measured. "I accept your apology." Boone exhaled, clearly relieved. "Also, I'm making a donation to the Navy SEAL Foundation. In your name. I'll make it public. I want to make things right." Ethan paused. "Thank you." And with that, the call ended. Boone slowly lowered the phone and handed it back to Doc, who said nothing, just gave a small nod of acknowledgement. "You did the right thing," Graves said. "Now we'll take care of the rest." For the next hour, the Dockhouse Tavern transformed into something else entirely. The 12 SEALs remained stationed throughout the bar. They didn't order drinks. They didn't talk loudly or pose. They simply occupied space, a living symbol of accountability. Each one sat or stood silently, as if guarding the very meaning of dignity. Customers who wandered and took one look at the room felt the weight of the presence inside, and instinctively turned around. In the back office, Doc sat with Boone and went over the numbers. Boone's face paled as the donation amount was settled. But he didn't argue. He signed the papers. A sizable contribution would be wired to the Navy SEAL Foundation, and the announcement would go live that same evening on the bar's website and community bulletin board. By the time Boone emerged, his shirt was damp with sweat, and his hands were trembling. But there was something new in his expression. Not fear, not anger, humility. Just before the team left, Graves approached him one last time. From now on, he said, this bar honors veterans, not just with flags, but with actions. Boone nodded silently. Good, Graves said. We'll be watching. The team departed the same way they had arrived, in silence, in formation, without a word wasted. And Redwood Bay would never forget what had happened that day. A week passed quietly in Redwood Bay. Word of what had happened at the Dockhouse Tavern spread fast, faster than gossip usually did in town, because this wasn't just gossip. It was legend in the making. People talked in hushed voices about the convoy of black vans, the dozen men who entered without saying much, and the way Travis Boone, the loudmouth of the waterfront, had gone pale and stayed that way for hours. No one knew exactly what was said, but everyone knew something had changed. Boone had followed through. True to his word, he made a public donation to the Navy SEAL Foundation, posted visibly on the bar's website and on a printed flyer taped to the inside of the tavern's front window. It read, in honor of Ethan Cole, a man of service, humility, and quiet strength. May this small gesture reflect the respect he and all veterans deserve. The tone of the Dockhouse Tavern began to shift. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Boone barked less. Rick the bouncer actually greeted people, and the usual crowd, especially the older veterans who had once avoided the place, began drifting in, cautiously, curious to see if the rumors were true. But Ethan Cole had not returned. Until one gray Thursday evening. Boone was behind the bar, refilling a line of condiment trays, when the front door opened with a soft creak. The room fell still. A few heads turned, and there, in the doorway, stood Ethan. He wore the same plain jeans, the same dark t-shirt, and his old faded cap pulled low. His expression was calm, his presence unmistakable. Boone froze. For a moment, no one moved. Then Boone straightened up, set down the tray, and walked around the bar. His steps weren't confident or boastful this time. They were quiet, measured. Mr. Cole, he said, loud enough for the room to hear, welcome back. Ethan nodded once. Evening. Boone reached for a clean glass, poured a fresh amber ale, and placed it gently on the bar. On the house, he said. No strings. Just welcome. Ethan walked up, took the drink, and gave Boone a long, thoughtful look. Thank you, he said. Boone didn't speak again. He just gave a small nod and returned behind the bar. Ethan took a seat in the same corner as before, the same table, the same chair. Only this time, no one looked away. A few patrons even nodded in his direction. He sipped his beer in silence. He wasn't looking for praise or attention, but it found him anyway. A man at the next table, a retired Coast Guard officer named Hank, raised his glass quietly. Ethan gave a small nod back. At the far end of the bar, Rick the bouncer offered something that might have been a respectful smile. And outside the window, through the drifting fog, the ocean rocked gently against the docks, like a heartbeat finally settling after a long tension. Ethan didn't need a parade. He didn't need to prove anything. He just wanted to be treated like anyone else. Now, finally he was. Later that night, as the tavern lights cast warm gold across the wooden walls, Ethan Cole sat quietly, his glass half full, gaze fixed on the gently swaying lantern above the bar. The chatter around him had resumed, casual and unforced. A couple played pool near the back. Hank told stories no one believed, but everyone enjoyed. Even Rick, the once silent bouncer, offered to put on a new playlist. The Dockhouse Tavern wasn't perfect, but it was trying. And Ethan respected that more than he could say. He finished his drink, placed the empty glass down, and stood. As he turned toward the door, Boone called after him. Not loudly, just enough to be heard. Mr. Cole, he said, wiping his hands with a towel. Thank you for coming back. Ethan offered a nod. Thanks for calling. With that, he stepped into the cool Redwood Bay air, the scent of salt and tide wrapping around him like an old memory. The walk back to his room was peaceful. Each step seemed lighter than the last. When he got home, he found a message blinking on his phone. It was from Logan Graves. Saw the post. Proud of how you handled it. We've always got your six. Wherever. Whenever. Ethan smiled faintly. He didn't reply. Not yet. Some things didn't need words. In the weeks that followed, the Dockhouse's reputation transformed. It became a known, vet-friendly bar. Not because of a flag or a donation, but because of a change in heart. Travis Boone, once a stubborn man with a chip on his shoulder, started hosting monthly Veterans Nights, offering free meals and drinks for those who had served. He even asked Ethan to come speak one evening. Ethan declined politely, but he attended quietly in the back, watching younger soldiers swap stories with older ones like old friends. The bar became a place where uniforms weren't judged but honored. And it all started with one man sitting alone in a corner, asking for nothing but respect. People forgot the exact day the SEALs came to town, but no one forgot the story. It became one of those whispers, shared between bartenders and regulars, repeated with reverence to newcomers. Careful how you treat the quiet ones, they'd say. You never know who might walk through that door, or who might walk in after him. And somewhere out there, 12 men still watched. Not with anger, not with threats, just with loyalty. Because brotherhood doesn't end at discharge. It follows you into every corner of the world, even into a quiet coastal town like Redwood Bay. And when you mess with one, sometimes you find out what honor really looks like. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in honor, loyalty, and second chances. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us what true respect looks like. Because sometimes the quietest voices carry the deepest truths.